Good morning, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us on this International Women's Day, where the theme this year is Breaking the Bias. I'm Kate Hussain, WISE CEO. We're delighted to be working with the RAF this year to celebrate and promote the value of diversity within a workforce. And we'll do this today by showcasing some of the amazing female RAF engineers at different stages of their careers. So just some housekeeping points before we begin. So can I please ask that you ensure you remain muted throughout the presentations, just so that we minimize any background noise. If your audio isn't working, you can see to the right panel there on the slide, you can actually dial in using the phone call option in the side panel. You can also please post any questions you have throughout the session using the questions function in the side panel, and we'll then answer them in a Q&A session after the main presentations. And oh yes, it is on the slide now. I was going to say it wasn't on my slide yesterday, but at the end of the session, we would really welcome your feedback to a very short survey, because we like to ensure that the webinars that we put out are the best that they can be. So I just want to give you a little thank you in advance for that. So before we start, I just wanted to give a short introduction to WISE for those people that may not be so familiar. So at WISE, we're a membership organisation with around 200 members. And they range from large multinationals to UK-based SMEs, but they also include academia. So we have a whole host of universities that are WISE members, colleges, and several government departments, for example, BAYS, GCHQ, NHS, etc. At WISE, we provide B2B products and services to our members and partners to improve their gender balance using a variety of collaborative methods. So firstly, we conduct innovative research and we share our findings to help address the specific issues that different members are facing. We also conduct benchmarking through our WISE 10 Steps program. This allows companies to see their year-on-year progress and also how they compare to their competitors. We work with our members and partners to seek out learnings and best practices and share these as case studies with everyone. So we have a really vast library on the WISE website, because at WISE we don't really believe there's any point reinventing the wheel when you don't need to. We also offer networking opportunities through a whole host of webinars, knowledge sharing events and other annual events that we hold, such as the WISE 10 Steps Measuring Progress event and our CXO breakfast. We also offer specific training sessions on introduction to diversity, unconscious bias, recruitment practices, and we also have an outreach support platform through My Skills, My Life. So in terms of moving forward to today, so the main event, we're now going to hear from three amazing role models within the RAF. They're going to talk about their career journeys to date and what opportunities and best practice they've actually experienced on their journeys with the RAF. So firstly, I'd like to introduce Corporal Katie Rowe, who is an aircraft technician and a mechanical instructor for the RAF. Katie, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. As Kay said, I'm Corporal Katie Rowe. I've been in the Air Force for 13 years now. I work on the Typhoon squadron, so I actually teach people how to fix all the aircraft. So before I actually joined the RAF, I gained my GCSEs. I went to college because I wanted to become a lawyer, but very, very quickly realised that sitting in a classroom wasn't really for me. My brother had joined about a year previously, and he'd kind of said how much that I would enjoy it. So I went down to the AFCO and they put me on to engineering. So my time in the RAF so far, as I said, I've been in for 13 years now. I joined up in February 2009. I obviously went to Holton, so did my basic training, and then went to DCAE Cosford, where I carried out some basic engineering training. I went to RAF Engineering and I was there for just shy of 2 years, and I absolutely loved it. I then went back to continue my further training at Cosford, and then got posted into the Typhoon maintenance facility. This is kind of like a depth maintenance, so we carry out all the major servicings on Typhoon. So I was in there for about 5 years, got my promotion, and then I moved to the school where I've been ever since. So my best bits of the RAF so far, there is so many. I honestly love my job. The opportunities I've gained through like the sport and travel. When I was at Odium, I played netball for the RAF. We carried out some training down in South Africa, which was incredible. Going through the travel side of things, I've seen places that I just wouldn't have seen beforehand. I'm a part of the Typhoon display team as well, so that allows me to go out and showcase the Typhoon. It shows its capabilities of what we can actually do with the aircraft while speaking to all the public, which is incredible. I've done many detachments. My first ever detachment was to Afghanistan with the Chinooks. And since then, I've done Falklands, Oman, and loads of other places. The variety of my job role, as I've said, obviously I did a frontline squadron on Chinooks, and then went into depth and onto my job now. So my biggest challenges so far, as I said, my first tour of Afghanistan, I was just over 18. It was my first time away. I kind of didn't really know what I was going into. I say it was my biggest challenge, but it was probably my best challenge because that was exactly what I joined up for. My tour of the Falklands was my first frontline squadron detachment on Typhoon. So even though I'd worked on them for 5 years, it was very different going down and working first line compared with depth. And then when I went out to Oman, sorry, I've got Typhoon taken off now. When I went out to Oman, I actually did a multi-role job, so I ended up covering armament sides and electrical side of stuff as well, which was really out of my depth, but it was good to kind of push yourself. And then my job at the minute is probably one of my biggest challenges, because trying to get people or find different ways to teach people how to fix the aircraft. If they don't get it the first time, it's trying to kind of get that extra training so they can learn how to do their job.
Thank you very much, Katie. So now I'd like to introduce Group Captain Liz O'Sullivan, that's currently on secondment with Rolls-Royce. Welcome, Liz.
Hello, thank you. As I've just been introduced, I'm a Group Captain Liz O'Sullivan and an Air Systems Engineering Officer in the Royal Air Force. And what I thought I'd do is break sort of my presentation down into 3 parts. I'll give you a little bit of a background on how I've got to be an Air Systems Engineer, and give you a flavour of some of the roles and appointments that I've had while being in the RAF, and sort of what my best bits and key challenges are. So my background, at school, science was definitely my focus, and probably played to my strengths. I was more practical in nature and quite severely dyslexic, so struggled more with languages. So I studied my GCSEs, maths, physics and chemistry at A-level, and went on to university to study a master's degree in mechanical engineering, manufacture and management. It was while at university that I completed industrial placements with the former British Steel, now Chorus, and actually with Rolls-Royce. So it's amazing how things come full circle. And I quickly realised I wanted something a little bit more, so more of a career and lifestyle associated with science and technology and engineering. And so I decided, so following seeing all the cool things that my friends got up to on a university air squadron, and equally having seen a careers talk about the RAF, I thought maybe this is for me. And so I joined up as an aero systems engineer, and get to work with loads of cool cutting edge technology, and that's across the full range, whether that be weapon systems, engines, the airframe itself, or some of the avionics, so navigation aids and instruments. I've also had additional out of role appointments, which I'll I'll come to on the next slide. And I move jobs every 2 to 3 years is generally, I've never spent any longer than 3 years in one place, and the shortest appointment that I've ever had is 18 months. So if we move on to the next slide, it'll give you a bit more background of the roles that I've been involved. The next slide will come up. There we go. My career to date. If I look first at my frontline experience, and what I mean by frontline, that tends to be on a RAF base with direct support to getting the aircraft in the sky. So they're often also referred to as command appointments. Here I've generally been responsible for rather large teams of engineering technicians, and that's generally grown with rank. So I've commanded at every rank that I've served in the Royal Air Force. So as a flight lieutenant, I was on the Jaguars, both first on what we called second line, so a more supporting role. I was the senior engineering officer on TriStar, number 216 Squadron, responsible for the air bridge out to Afghanistan. And then my penultimate tour to the one that I'm in at the moment, I was OC Engineering and Logistics Wing at RAF Price Norton. So what that actually entailed, I was the Chief Air Engineer or the Military Continuing Airworthiness Manager, and for all the air mobility assets. So that's the Voyager, the C-130, the A400, the C-17 and airborne equipment. So huge role. I had direct responsibility for about 650 personnel and issuing engineering authorizations out to over 1,000. Hugely busy role, hugely demanding, but massively rewarding as well. I've also done a number of staff roles. They tend to be called more desk jobs, so again, more in a supporting role. The engineering's ones I've done, I've been at squadron leader, working supporting the Typhoon and the Battle of Britain Memorial flight. And I was also the Typhoon Systems Integration Head, and I've worked in the Military Aviation Authority. So again, those sort of roles have involved airworthiness delegations as well, so still working whether the aircraft's fit to fly, but also programme management roles and an element of finance as well. I've also mentioned about out-of-branch appointments. So I've been really lucky. As a flight lieutenant, I was staff officer to Chief of the Air Staff, so got to see the highest working levels within the Ministry of Defence. I've also been directing staff at our wing commander and equivalent ranks within the Army, Navy and Civil Service on advanced command and staff course. So within education, teaching everything from strategy through to capability decisions through to operational planning. And then finally, now I'm 3 months into a secondment at Rolls-Royce. So I'm working in their business development team, providing a customer focus, and that's ranging from working on sustainability projects such as synthetic aviation fuel all the way to space propulsion. So again, huge range and huge variety. And so if I move on to my final slide, some of what my benefits are and the associated challenges. I think very early on you get a level of responsibility that I don't necessarily have seen similar, or from my experience in the civilian sector. From an awareness perspective, I was making decisions of whether an aircraft can fly or not, and that's right from the beginning of my career. Clearly, I take the advice of my team and I have a huge amount of subject matter experts, but ultimately it's my decision. And I've got a picture there of an A400M engine of a rather critical situation where we had when we had a gearbox problem and the aircraft was actually flying at the time. And I need to balance those airworthiness decisions in the operational context. So a number of those aircraft absolutely need to fly. Now, whether it's because they are intercepting another aircraft, whether it's they're providing vital aid, whether it's they're providing a medevac, I need to balance on whether that aircraft is suitable to fly or not, given the problem that it had, but the impact that can mean operationally as well. and I have to make that in a really timely decision. So sometimes I'll have plenty of time for collaboration, maybe when I'm looking at maintenance extensions, and other times I'll literally be having to make a decision of whether we recall an aircraft because potentially we've got a refueling problem. And there's no better picture, I think, there that kind of sums up my tour at RAF Bryce Norton, which is the evacuation of Afghan nationals and British nationals back to the UK following the withdrawal. Personnel is the greatest privilege that I have in terms of responsibility for people. I have worked with the most outstanding teams, and I'll come to that again in a minute. I've also got a huge financial responsibility in some of my roles, responsible for multi-million pounds worth of equipment and driving some of the project management skills. So particularly seen on Typhoon, when I was working on a project Centurion, which was looking at moving tornado weapon systems onto Typhoon as the Tornado was going out of service. So all of those are a huge challenge, but with that comes a massive reward from what I'm doing in the Royal Air Force. I have a massive variety. The number of aircraft that I've worked on has been huge, and I can't be an expert in everything, so I've absolutely had to rely on my subject matter experts. So it is a challenge of constantly feeling that you're on catch up with some of your technical experts, but you have to rely on them because it's so critical. Again, I've had a huge variety of roles, but my training has very much prepared me to be able to take those on. I've also worked at different locations across the UK and moved many times. That in itself is great because I like the variety, but equally that presents a challenge as I have a young son and my husband is also serving in the RAF. So we have to balance that with our family life. The opportunities I've had have been fantastic. There have been no 2 days the same in my RAF career. I have been able to travel the world, and that's in all different contexts. So at one end of the spectrum, I might be working with ambassadors and talking in embassies. I might be on the front line in Afghanistan, so particularly in my case working in Bastion, or I might be working with coalition partners, both from other services, my own service, or even from industry as well. The education I've been given has fantastic. Clearly, I went with the degree, but I've also had the opportunity to partake in master's level courses throughout my career to build on my training so I can deliver in future roles. The experiences, also sport. You know, my friends went fibbing on the University Air Squadron. I've learnt to ski. I've done plenty of adventurous training. And the experience I've had, I've flown in so many different aircraft, everything from a fast jet through to a Lancaster, which is a picture at the bottom. I've done some work with the palace. Like I've said, I've worked with embassies. I've also worked with industry. But for me, if I sum one thing up, it's all been down to the people that I've worked with. Outstanding individuals, outstanding teams, and that's been across the whole force. So that's not just the RAF, it's the personnel within the sister services, within the civil service, and with industry itself. And I think probably I'll finish my bit with the picture at the far bottom there, and that's my team on leading the poster RAF Bryce Norton. So I had rather uniquely an entire female leadership team. It is unique, but it certainly, I don't believe, will be the last time. And I think it's probably quite fitting to end there on International Women's Day. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Liz. There's certainly lots of variety in all of that. So finally, I'd like to introduce Squadron Warrant Officer Claire Haller, who's an aircraft engineer, technician and technical trainer for the RAF. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you, Kay, for the introduction, and good morning, everybody. Delighted to be here today on International Women's Day. It's quite interesting actually listening to the other speakers, because I draw so many parallels with them, and some of the exciting opportunities they've had I can also share. So it isn't a one-off. I can absolutely say with all sincerity that it's all of the opportunities they've mentioned is available for all. So who am I? I'm an aircraft engineer, a technician, mechanical, so the what we call the heavy side of engineering and training. I am currently the warrant officer on the mechanical training school at Cosford in the West Midlands. We have on the school about 1,000 trainees at any one time undergoing their engineering apprenticeships for the Air Force. Next slide, please. Thank you. I've completed just actually 35 years of service, so most definitely the tail end now of my career. I've always said that I will stay in the RAF all the while I'm enjoying it, and I can honestly say, along with the other speakers, that I genuinely love my job and genuinely love what I do. So my career started in 1987 at RAF Lynham on the beloved Hercules aircraft. I worked both first and second line as a senior aircraft woman, which meant because I joined as a non-commissioned rank, it meant I had the opportunity to join straight from leaving school, having completed equivalent GCSEs. I had intended to, a bit like the first speaker, Katie, I did intend to stay on at school for sixth form to do A-levels. My intention was to be a pharmacist. However, I think I lasted 3 days at the sixth form centre and decided that school was no longer for me. I needed to leave. I had wanderlust. I wanted to travel the world and certainly get out of the confines of the small city I felt at the time and start something new and afresh. And I've never looked back, actually. I probably did have concerns and worries that throwing away a university opportunity was a considerable concern of mine, but actually, as we go through the slides, you'll see that I've more than kind of made up for that kind of lost initial opportunity. So I was promoted to corporal just before I had my first child in 1998, and I managed a heavy rectification team. That's basically the large jobs on aircraft, so huge jobs with regards to undercarriage removals, fuel tank work, that type of job. So not the day-to-day activities, the big jobs that you would consider on aircraft. In 1999, it felt at the time that my world was turned upside down and on its head, because I was asked to become an instructor, so posted to RAF Cosford as a trade instructor. I was the first female trade instructor for my trade, and it wasn't necessarily something that I wanted to do at the time. Obviously, people felt that it was a good career move and choice for me. But it honestly was something that I thought I wasn't going to be, it wasn't my forte, it wasn't something I was good at. I thought I was good at engineering, and that's where I probably wanted to stay. I very quickly realised actually imparting what I knew and encouraging others to kind of stick with their chosen career path was hugely rewarding. So actually it was the best decision, and was really, you know, very pleased that that I did actually complete that tour. Next slide, please. So from my initial hesitancy at going to Cosford, I was promoted whilst there and promoted into the rank of sergeant, where we stood up a new training management wing, RAF Cosford. From there, I then went back to the beloved engineering and worked on Merlin aircraft at RAF Benson, and through my work there, I was awarded a 2-star commendation. In 2013, I was deployed to the Falkland Islands, so was delighted to see Katie's picture of the penguins on her slide. Not many people get to travel 8,000 miles away, but the Falkland Islands was certainly breathtaking, and the wildlife was incredible, and to be part of something like that was very rewarding. In 2015, I was promoted to, I was in between there from the rank of sergeant and became chief technician. I was promoted there whilst at Benson. Then I was promoted to flight sergeant. I mentioned earlier on I left school with just a handful of GCSEs. Throughout my time in the Air Force, I've completed part-time study, and I've completed a BA in psychology, and a Cert Ed, and a BSc in counselling psychology. In 2015, I applied for a CAS fellowship, which is basically an award that is given once a year. You have to put a thesis together, and you can apply for a Chief of Air Staff fellowship. I managed to secure a fellowship, which meant I was then sponsored through university on a master's programme for a year, in which I studied occupational psychology. Next slide, please. From the psychology degree, the occupational psychology degree, I wanted to look at all things that looked at people's progress in the workplace, from introduction to the workplace all through recruitment, selection, retainment. So I applied for a job in recruitment and selection for the Air Force. Fantastic job. It was hugely rewarding. I'd previously worked with taking a school leaver in many cases to become an engineer, but actually it's the step before that, even with recruitment and selection. So actually going into schools, going into universities, talking to people about their career, allaying any concerns, any fears they may have, was, like I say, hugely rewarding. So that was a great opportunity for me. In 2019, I was deployed to Qatar, an Air Force base called Al Udeid, where I fulfilled, whilst in an engineering function, it was in a quality role, so lots of quality assurance, governance, and ensuring all health and safety aspects of the area was adhered to. Next slide, please. So the benefits and achievements for myself, I would definitely say professional training qualifications, and often it's not just for engineering. Throughout my time, like I said, I've done Cert Ed, so it does make me a qualified teacher if I wanted to leave the Air Force, but also qualifications in health and safety, qualifications in auditing, quality auditing, but even diverse ones such as bereavement counselling. I was a bereavement counsellor, as a TRIM practitioner. So, you know, there's many and varied qualifications that you can apply for and can be sponsored for through the RAF. As an additional duty, I've been a mediator, so looking at workplace conflicts. But that has also given me an opportunity wherever I've been posted. I've been able to offer my services to local councils, so neighbourhood disputes. Which is really important for anybody in the Air Force to become part of the community in which they live. So that's been really important to me. Another additional duty that I fulfil is diversity and inclusion advisor. I've also been a school governor at a primary school, one at RAF Benson, and you know, I think most of us, it's not just about the day job that we do, it's about the additional things that we can, the citizenship behaviours, I call them, the things we can do for each other to make our job as enjoyable as it can be, often in difficult circumstances. So the squadron functions and charity events have been very, very important to me. And one, the RNIB is a charity close to my heart. I have represented the RAF as well, like Katie, in netball, and also biathlon and golf. And I'm currently a deputy chairperson for the Shadow Engineering Board, which provides support to the executive engineering boards of the RAF. A highlight for me, I was very honoured to receive a Meritorious Service Medal in 2019. So that's me, a whistle-stop tour of Clare Hauler. I hope that was okay. Thank you.
Claire, that was absolutely great. Thank you. And I'd like to say a huge thank you to all of you. I don't know about our audience listening, but I've found it very informative. I've learned so much about the RAF that I didn't know. I didn't realise there were so many different roles available, but even within each of those roles, there's so many facets to each of the roles, which is, yeah, you just if you're going into an engineering role in the RAF, I would assume it was an engineering role, but to hear that there's finance in there and there's HR in there and all those other bits and pieces. So I think very informative. Thank you. I think now we're moving on to our Q&A session. So if I could ask all of our guest speakers to put your cameras back on. I have a number of questions that came in to start this off, and then I think that Hannah is going to share the others that have been coming in through the chat. So starting, and anybody to answer really, what opportunities has the RAF given you that you would say that you really value the most?
For me, it would be like just the travel opportunities. I think between the three of us, we've covered some areas of the world. And I just think going to the Falklands was so special for me, just because you see a totally different side of the world. People pay thousands of pounds to view it. Penguins are my favourite animal as well. So to see them actually out in the world is just incredible.
Okay.
I think for me, one thing I didn't mention, which is shameful of me really, is that I'm a mum of two boys, 24 and 21 years old now, and actually I haven't compromised on either. I've not had to compromise my career to be a mum, and that's been important to me, and that's it. I have been actively encouraged. Having a child being pregnant 25 years ago, working with men that had never worked with a woman before, let alone a pregnant woman, was you know, truly groundbreaking for some of them at the time, I think. But actually being encouraged with that and looking at the developments now for wraparound childcare and flexible working that we have now for all staff is great. So for me, that is. It's not necessarily my achievement, but I feel part of that, and the decision making to get to that point, which I think is hugely significant.
No, that's really great. Thank you, Claire. Liz, what would you say?
I think it's so similar. It's the experiences. It's the experience that money can't buy that I've been able to do. Whether, you know, as Katie pointed out, the travelling aspect, but you know, to fly in a Lancaster, you know, I'm never going to get that opportunity anywhere else. And it's the whole experience, you know, as Claire's pointed out there, in terms of the support that I've got from my family and my family life, with a husband that serves as well. It's the full package. I couldn't pick out just one thing. It's the full experience.
And Liz, certainly, you know, from your presentation, it sounded it's a whole lifestyle. It isn't just a job, as opposed to, I think, a lot of in civilian life, it can be your job and then kind of you have your home life, but it sounds like it's a whole lifestyle approach. Okay, great. What do you think other organisations can learn from the RAF and the way they support women in engineering roles? You know, that real challenging the stereotypes and breaking the bias.
I think it's for me, it's having a platform for women's voices to be heard. I think that's really important. I think and truly heard and understood is an important one, because we can all listen, but we don't necessarily understand. So I think it's getting that balance right. I think is really important. You know, I remember in the past I needed gloves that fit me, gloves that weren't made for men. You know, because actually trying to screw nuts and bolts with gloves that are just, you know, huge on you is just impossible. So actually just saying I need gloves that fit me, okay, you know, next week, but actually it's really important to kind of understand what the issues sometimes are.
Okay, great. Liz, Katie, anything that you would add?
So I think part of what I'm doing at the moment, working with Rolls-Royce, is actually looking at what we can learn from them, and it's a two-way street. And I think what's really important is keeping the dialogue open, and it's understanding, you know, what unique challenges, and that's not just women. I know that's why we're here, but it's far broader. Is having that conversation of, you know, what doesn't quite work because of those previous stereotypes, like a proper fitting uniform, or how individuals may feel if they are a single parent, those aspects. And it's really just having that conversation, because I don't think people naturally mean to be biased or mean any offence to it, but it's trying to encourage people to, well, if you realise what you've said there, do you realise you've alienated potentially 50% of the population, in terms of, you know, you've discounted women in a certain way. So I think it's just being really open and honest and talking about it and breaking down those stereotypes.
Right, thank you. Okay, next question. So you all have shared with us this morning how wonderful you found your experience in the RAF. If you cast your mind back to kind of that day one when you were joining up, you know, in terms of your perceptions of the RAF before you were actually through the gates and a part of it, how closely were those perceptions matched by the reality of what you experienced, would you say?
Okay. For me, I think, because my brother had joined up just beforehand, he'd kind of gone through his training, but he'd gone through the regiment side of training. So I'd heard all of his horror stories. So I was petrified going to basic training. I was expected to be treated like a little bit harsher, but I kind of got through Halton, and for me, I was like, oh, was that the training? So it was kind of a little bit easier. I don't know whether my brother had just told me horror stories or not, but I think for me, we've touched on it quite a bit, and I think the biggest impact for us is the people that we've worked alongside. So I think I still talk to people that I joined up with going through basic training, 9 weeks. I'd never met them before in my life, yet I still talk to them 13 years later. And I think that for me is kind of the biggest thing. I didn't realise how much of a family unit it would be.
Yeah, it's like a second family. Okay, that's great. Liz, Claire, what would you say? There's a knowing smile there, Claire. What would you share? Go on, sorry, Liz.
I think it very much would be, my perception was that I was turning up, this was going to be for a short service commission at the time, so it was going to be 6 years, and I very much felt I'd have sort of it beaten into me that I needed to be really direct, I needed to be really shouty, a lot of shouting, and that I had to be part of that person. And I think what my perception has changed, because I absolutely was employed in the Royal Air Force for being me and myself and being authentic, and I think probably I didn't realise how true to myself that I actually can be, because I haven't changed. Yeah, I've learned a huge skill set, and I know how to react in slightly different situations, but I've absolutely been me.
That's great, thank you, Liz. Claire, would you add anything there? I mean, you've paved the way in being a pioneer from those older days and possibly made it easier for those that follow you.
Quite a long time. I would absolutely echo what Liz has just said, that unto thine own self be true. Just keep a handle on that every day, all day, every day, absolutely. But I think I expected and I wanted it to be traditional. I wanted the traditions. I wanted the discipline. I wanted the standards. I wanted to have a rigid rule book in many ways. I like that style. But actually, when I cast my mind back, whilst the traditions are there and lots of things are, you know, we are steeped in tradition, the amount of change over the last 35 years has just been incredible. And that's actually some feat, to maintain those traditions whilst changing so rapidly in both the way we conduct our business, the way we articulate leadership, has changed so rapidly. It isn't shouty. It most certainly used to be. But we recognise the strength in people and leadership that goes far beyond that. You know, we've definitely grown as an organisation, and I think all of us are very proud of that.
Okay, great, thank you. Hannah, are there any other questions that came through in the chat that you could share?
Morning, yes. Ella Smart is asking, what would you say is the best university degree for joining the RAF?
So there's only 2 degrees. So the two branches that you need a degree for is engineering, so the same as Liz has mentioned, but also law. Every other branch and trade, you don't need a degree to join the Air Force, but any sort of educational background, any sort of lifelong learning is all relevant. So there isn't a best one per se, unless you wanted to be an engineering officer. If you want to be an engineering officer, you have to have a degree. And if you want to be a lawyer, you have to have a law degree.
And I'd say you don't need a degree to be an engineering officer eventually. So and I use my husband as an example there. So he joined up as a technician and then chose to apply for his commission and then become an officer. So in terms of a best degree, there isn't one. You need to have a science-based engineering-based sort of degree to go direct as an engineering officer. But really study what you enjoy, because if you enjoy the subject and you want to learn, you're generally good at it. But don't worry, because the training that you get given in the Royal Air Force is everything that you need to go and do your job.
And Emma Warrington is asking, do you have to decide on a role you want before joining up, before signing up?
You do currently, but you're very much held, you know, you're handheld really through that process once you go into one of the offices and can talk that through with you. Depending on how you want to join, you sit a segment of psychometric tests, which kind of will lead the recruiters to where your skill set may sit and where you would be best be placed. But actually have an idea of, you know, what you'd like to do, because as Liz said, if you think you'd like to do it, then you're going to be good at it. If you think you find it interesting, then you will find it, you know, you'll be good at it because of that. But there really is something for everybody.
So sorry, I'm just going to jump in there. So on that point, I actually went to the AFCO not having a clue what I wanted to join up as. I did the tests and they actually came back and said about engineering. I'd never touched a tool in my life before. I'd always known I wasn't very academic and I was always fiddling with stuff, so it kind of made a little bit of sense. But I think those tests are very true and they do help you understand or help you guide you to the job that would suit you best.
I think we've got one final question. Did the RAF support you through formal training in engineering, and that would be transferable outside of the RAF?
So I can give an example. So through the RAF, I became a chartered engineer. So that absolutely is transferable. So chartered engineer, doesn't matter where you've got your chartership, that's recognised by the Engineering Council. So absolutely transferable in that respect.
Hannah, is that all the questions we have time for?
Yeah, I think that's all we've got time for today. Thank you so much for our panelists.
Yeah, so ladies, thank you so much. I've learned so much. I have 2 teenage daughters, and Claire, very interestingly, I did become the pharmacist. but Katie and Liz, back to your points, my youngest is very interested in engineering as well, and I had absolutely no idea of the wealth of opportunity. So it's been absolutely great talking with you all today. Thank you so much. And if I could ask the audience if you could please complete our survey so that we can take any feedback for next time. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.